I think they have our names. They have them backwards. Oh, should we switch? Here.
Oh, I wasn't sure.
I could switch it. Thank you. Thanks. I was trying to do it. Yeah. Yeah, but without. Yes. Yeah, I heard it was really good.
Good afternoon. I would like to call to order this special joint meeting of the Encinitas City Council and Planning Commission on Wednesday, June 26, 2024 at 3:30 p.m. And if the clerk please could call the roll.
Absolutely. We'll start with the Planning Commissioner. Commissioner Prendergast?
Here.
Commissioner Sherrod? Is present. Commissioner Whitaker?
Present.
Vice Chair Ryan?
Present.
Chair Dalton?
Here.
And I'll move to City Council. Councilmember Ehlers?
Here.
Councilmember Lyons?
Here.
Councilmember Hinsey?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell?
Here.
Mayor Kranz?
Here.
Record will reflect that all members of the City Council and the Planning Commission are present.
All right, thank you very much. And I want to thank you all for joining us at this unusual time. I know it's not easy sometimes. We are gathered to consider one agenda item, which is a conversation and update on the El Camino Real specific plan. And the contact people are Policy and Housing Planning Manager Anders and Housing Services Manager Daisy. And so it looks like we're getting ready to get a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Kranz. Good afternoon, everybody, and council members and planning commissioners. I'm Melinda Dacey, the Housing Services Manager, and we are here this evening, or this afternoon, to go over the El Camino Real specific plan to provide you all with an introduction to the document and get your feedback. So today we have our Director of Development Services, Carrie Kushak, Patty Anders, Planning Manager, myself, Melinda Dacey, and our consultant team. We have Brooke Peterson and Shannon Baer. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brooke Peterson so she can continue on with the presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, and planning commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. Again, I'm Brooke Peterson. I'm the principal in charge and director of planning and design at RIC, and we've been partnering with your staff and with you to prepare this specific plan. So I want to give you just a quick roadmap as to where we are at in the process. The project kicked off in summer of 2021. We prepared a comprehensive opportunities constraints analysis, followed by a workshop where we presented the results of that analysis, as well as conducted visioning exercises with the community. We also held a roundtable discussion with developers and some stakeholders to get their input primarily on development standards and feasibility. We then prepared a series of design alternatives for the specific plan area land use plan and presented those at a second workshop in summer of 2022. We then moved forward to select a preferred design alternative, and thus then with that in hand to prepare the specific plan itself and to initiate the preparation of the environmental impact report. We received direction from you, council, in summer of 2023 to change the direction in terms of the preparation of from an EIR to an MND, and then associated changes in the specific plan that warranted that switch from an EIR to an MND. We then prepared the MND and the specific plan. We held a workshop with your community just a couple of weeks ago on the draft plan. That draft plan and the MND are now out for public review. And we want to step through the contents of the specific plan with you this evening. After following this joint workshop, we will close public review. That public review closes July 2nd, and then we'll move forward with final revisions to those documents and come back before you, both the commission and the council, for adoption. So the purpose of tonight is to step through the changes in project scope that occurred, provide an overview to you of the specific plan. We're just going to go over some of the key elements, and we're going to particularly focus on the design elements of the streetscape and the objective design standards. And then, as I mentioned, the M&D is out for public review, so open to receive any comments you have on that. So background on how we came to this point in the process. Your housing element sets forth goals and policies towards towards affordable housing implementation. That led the city to pursue a grant with Housing and Community Development to prepare a specific plan. So that what led us to then start that process. As I've mentioned, we've held 3 public workshops, one on the visioning and just looking at existing conditions, another looking at the design alternatives for the specific plan, and then third one just to take comments on the plan itself as it's out for public review. I noted the developer roundtable, which really provided some key information towards understanding development feasibility to inform the design standards. And then you appointed a task force, and we held a number of task force meetings that assisted in the development of the plan. They went through the draft specific plan components in more detail and provided feedback to staff and to us on revisions to that. To step through the changes in project direction that we received from you as a result of new state legislation that provides opportunity for cities to approve or requires, I should say, cities to approve affordable housing by right in certain areas. You then directed us to remove the mixed-use overlay that had been a component of the specific plan, and instead to move forward with creating more measurable and targeted objective design standards. Also to provide for increase the streetscape and the emphasis on streetscape design along El Camino, and that led us then to prepare an M&D versus an EIR. We also then removed the Encinitas specific plan from the boundary, as well as the mobile home park, as we were no longer applying the mixed-use overlay. Again, provided a new emphasis on the streetscape and then the design standards. Those objective design standards that are in the plan will apply to all projects, even those invoking state law. Here's just a slide to note the removal. To the left is shows the previous project area boundary that included the Encinitas Ranch specific plan, and then to the right is the current project area. So I wanted to touch on why we are still preparing a specific plan, even though we removed the zoning changes. El Camino has extensive, unique conditions in terms of being a vehicle-oriented, heavily trafficked commuter route, and having a heavy amount of strip commercial, and then that's surrounded by the single-family homes, which really provides a need for, an opportunity for objective design standards that really improve the experience and the streetscape along there, as well as provide a mechanism and really an important tool for the city to apply standards for future development that does come through and invoke that state law. That tool is really important for the city to be able to guide the design of what occurs as that future development comes into play. The mobility improvements and funding are also important. I'm going to step through what those mobility improvements in the plan are, and those are an important component to support that future development and improve the bicycle and pedestrian safety through the corridor. So I want to just step through the key components. This slide outlines the contents of the specific plan. Chapter 2 outlines the vision that was developed with the community at that first workshop, as well as goals and objectives to support that vision. The land use chapter sets forth the development regulations and has the land use plan. The design standards are comprised of the objective design standards across a whole list of different topic areas, which I'm going to step through in just a moment. It includes the mobility networks and improvements. It outlines a community benefit chapter. The project sets forth, the plan sets forth a program for providing community benefits above standards as future development comes through. Provides a chapter to ensure that future development provides for public services and infrastructure commensurate with that level of development, and then sets forth the administration and implementation by which development needs to occur. So as I mentioned, the land use chapter includes and addresses the allowed uses. There are a small number of changes from what the code allows to what's allowed in the specific plan. It outlines the development standards across floor area ratio, height, both stepbacks from El Camino as well as stepbacks as you go up in building height. We heard significant input from the community in terms of concerns related to adjacency between commercial uses along the roadway, along the corridor, and the neighboring residential. So we provided adjacency standards and guidelines for that. The chapter also includes open space requirements and addresses parking. So as I mentioned, the plan includes objective design standards across a long list of topics. They are listed here. And these apply to private development coming through. And again, as I mentioned, regardless of whether they are invoking state law or not. So these really are intended site design, buffers, and screening. That's both between uses along the corridor as well as to the surrounding residential. There's extensive standards to address and improve the streetscape and the experience of what we call the public realm, which is that area, the public area along the roadway. It also has standards to address the frontage zone, and that is actually the private zone that occurs outside of the roadway public right-of-way and the front of the building facade. And then I'm not going to necessarily go through the rest of them, but there are just standards really trying to improve and ensure a high quality to the design, the aesthetic, the experience that occurs, and really revitalize the corridor through improvements according to these standards as development comes through. Here's a couple of examples of the objective design standards, and the plan also includes these renderings, which stipulates the requirements for the building step backs, which show step back standards shall apply to the building facade along El Camino and along Encinitas Boulevard as the building floors go up. The internal private drive standard addresses them being designed to reduce conflicts between vehicles and pedestrian and bicycle circulation through driveway design, physical barriers, and visual cues such as signage, painted asphalt, and unique pavers. So hopefully, as you can see in these images, we're definitely trying to use these objective design standards to be measurable and improve the aesthetic and safety experience of users within the corridor. As I mentioned, there are standards relating to the frontage zone. So that frontage zone is that space that goes between the edge of the public right-of-way, and it's a 6-foot wide zone that occurs between that edge of the public right-of-way and the building facade. And the reason for addressing that frontage zone is to address the experience, the aesthetic, the amenities that occur most immediately along the corridor. There are standards for site furnishings and requiring them to be made of consistent and complementary styles, materials, and colors, requiring them to be installed. And again, here we note that they should be installed at an interval of 300 feet, an example of where we're truly trying to make sure that those objective design standards are measurable in order to be implementable as we really want them to be and as they're stipulated in the plan. Here are a couple of renderings showing the future conditions, the hoped for, the vision future conditions along the roadway. The renderings are illustrative only, but they are consistent with the objective design standards. And I want to just note that there is a constrained segment of El Camino that goes from Encinitas Boulevard to Garden View, and that has a narrower, that's why we call it a constrained right-of-way. It's a narrower segment than occurs north of Garden View. And so we wanted to provide conditions and address the conditions for both of those types of segments. I want to specifically note that we have identified standards for what happens within that right-of-way, but those are really contingent and dependent upon other conditions such as environmental constraints and environmentally sensitive areas, slope conditions, and utility conditions. So we want to ensure that the standards we've applied can still be implemented in and around and take into account conditions that exist that are really beyond the control of the developer or the city. This slide outlines those two conditions or two types of segments that I noted. The top one notes that unconstrained condition from Garden View up to Leucadia, which shows 4 lanes of travel, and then a 7-foot separated buffered bikeway, then a 5-foot parkway, and then a 5-foot sidewalk. With an 18-foot median. The constrained segment has 3 lanes of travel with a 24, a little bit wider center median. And again, that 7-foot buffered bikeway, the 5-foot parkway, and the 5-foot sidewalk. So in addition to those conditions and the cross-section outlining what the facilities should look like and the measurements for them, the plan also includes a number of improvements to improve transit experience, bicycle experience, and pedestrian experience. So the transit experience includes improved signage, benches, shelters, bus pads, essentially improving the amenities for those using transit from what exists today. Again, bicycle improvements, we're proposing a cycle track along El Camino to Real, primarily to improve that safety and just additional experience in terms of being a more inviting and pleasant experience. That's primarily done through that buffered experience. Pedestrian improvements would include higher visibility crosswalks, stop bar, countdown signals, and others. Again, the corridor is really a vehicular-focused area, and we want to implement measures to improve the safety and experience of other modes of travel. Here, this slide just notes the additional amenities that we've proposed for the bus stops and the transit users. As I mentioned, Chapter 6 is a community benefits chapter, and we heard from the community that there's really a high importance of integrating community benefits beyond what the code requires that will benefit the users and residents in the area. And so what we've designed is a program that allows developers to receive points for different amenities that they provide above what's required in return for a couple benefits. So primarily, and I should note just that there's a whole range of options of different benefits that they can provide, ranging from additional open space, trail improvements or extensions, stormwater improvements such as bioswales, and then sustainability, climate change related measures such as EV charging stations and others. And then in return, there's a point system that allows them to receive either streamlined processing or reduced parking. So in closing, I just want to show the project website. There has been a project website up with all of the content and documents prepared for the project, as well as all the notifications for any of the community outreach events and touch points. With that, I'm open for questions as well as staff.
Okay, so we have buttons to request to speak over here, but you'll need to raise your hand, planning commissioners. Do we have public comment? One
so far.
Do we have any preliminary planning commission or council member questions, or are we ready for the council member Ehlers?
Yeah. I want to understand the relationship with AB 2011 and SB 6 and residential density, and then density bonus and waivers. So I assume that what we can have, what I learned in a briefing was between 30 and 60 units per acre, where there are certain widths of El Camino Real in here that can go up. How many stories was it? I don't know if staff can fill in on that.
Yes, based on the roadway width in the corridor, the height allowed under AB 2011 and SB 6 is 45 feet.
45 feet, okay. And then California density bonus law can be applied to this if they, and we already require virtually enough inclusionary to qualify for that. So can they then take the 45, 30 and 60 and bump it up to potentially 30 or 40%, maybe even 50% higher, depending on how many units they set aside as density bonus?
Based on the affordability component in the city and the affordability level of the units proposed in AB 2011 and SB 6, they would be eligible for either a 35% density bonus or a 50% density bonus.
Depending on which law they use. And then really where I'm going is, if they then, we're talking about all these setbacks. And the problem we're running into throughout the city is the waivers are used to just blow away all of our development standards. So we're putting in all these development standards, but my question is, they're almost automatically qualifying for density bonus. Aren't we at risk of putting in step backs and setbacks that they just go, well, no, we need it in order to achieve our density? And certainly, if anybody got to the upper end of that with 90, which is 3 times our highest density right now, that would be, that's pretty amazing. But I'm assuming they'd have to go up, and they probably wouldn't be able to do the step back. So my concern is the same mechanism is in place to dismantle everything we're doing here. Is there any way to make it so it can't be dismantled?
They can request to waive development standards. However, we would encourage them to make sure that they do comply with the development standards in the specific plan. With that said, they also have to indicate that there is a need for the waiver to develop the affordable housing. So in some cases, how they present that may not need to have a waiver of a step back.
Yeah, I understand, but the way it seems to work, or the way it has worked, is that they get to choose which items they waive, whether it's height and whether it's step back or setback, and we can't pick and choose amongst their waivers. At least that's the law that I've seen, and so. Again, all I'm pointing out is be careful. I don't want to have a false belief we're making this look pretty and perfect when almost every project that goes in with residential is likely to qualify for California density bonus law and is likely to request waivers, just so we understand that going in.
Yes, but I think it's important to clarify that that is state law and that there's nothing that we can do and it is unlimited waivers, right? And so it is frustrating and makes planning documents very challenging to promote in the public when the documents that you create are generally not followed by the developers. So, Councilmember Lyons, and then I'll get to you, Steve.
Thank you. And I'm not sure, Melinda or Brooke, who would answer this, so please bear with me. My question is more from the design perspective, because you've focused on that a little bit here with your presentation and some illustrations. I look at the corridor from where the opportunities and constraints are, and my brain is still back a little bit with the original specific plan objectives we had, and now I know we've changed them. So I'm trying to knit together, how do we achieve some of the design objective standards that are important? I know, and so my specific question is, there's a lot of grade change on the west side of El Camino Real that is a constraint to achieving some of the, I mean, it's certainly been a constraint to achieving connectivity on the west side of El Camino Real over the years. And so there's a lot of barriers. In this specific plan and in our design objectives, can you help me shortcut that a little bit? Are we addressing what the design objective standards would be for addressing the slopes and grade on the west side of El Camino Real so that there's more connectivity between the different land uses? Or is that now not part of what we're considering?
We have tried to address the kind of broken connections or the lack of connectivity less through addressing the topography. We certainly considered topography in terms of the view sheds and things like that. So we definitely recognize those conditions. We have tried to address the linkages better by encouraging development, encouraging developments as they develop to include pedestrian and bicycle connections or like paseos and pedestrian walkways, and increased the number by which, or number of which they need to provide in their developments.
Okay. I'll be looking at that document kind of more specifically with that in mind. My second question is brief, I think. As far as funding, and you said that's something that's being addressed as well in the document. What you've presented a lot of is public realm. Is there any tie to the development in the public realm and the developer? So what is the tie between the opportunity to develop a segment along this specific plan and a developer obligation to also make improvements in the public realm? Is there a tie there?
There's no direct tie to require them to make the improvements to the public realm. We've tried our very best to provide requirements for them to address what happens in the frontage zone so that they are starting to address that experience along the roadway. We certainly have extensive guidelines for the streetscape, but that doesn't necessarily require the developer to implement them. There are a number, however, of improvements that they could make that are included in the community benefit, so that if they want to provide that community benefit, then there's points that they can receive in response to that.
And so that would mean what you show as far as the public realm, the benches and the sidewalks and the amenities, that is on us. That's the city of Encinitas to fund.
It would be on the city to fund unless the developer chose to utilize the community benefits program, yes.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Chairman Dalton.
Just to play off of Councilmember Eller's earlier comment, sorry, Bruce. Are there examples where a specific plan could offer more benefit than the basic state law provides, and then if they're going to get that benefit, then they cannot use an incentive to deviate from specific items like the step back? As I understand it right now, if they're using state law, they can waive any requirement that they choose. But if they're using some benefit that we're providing them through our program, then our program can specifically say they cannot waive step back or height or some issue that we find to be a sacred cow to us.
I don't know of any conditions where we could prohibit use of the waivers, as that's state law.
I'm thinking specifically like City of San Diego's Complete Communities program, right? If you are using Complete Communities program, you can't deviate from the height. You have to provide a parkway improvement, things like that. And so within that program, they've offered the developer something that they find more desirable than just the basic state density bonus law.
Might be worth exploring, but I don't think it's part of this process here, so. Okay, so we will now hear from the public.
We do have one speaker, Donna Westbrook.
Donna Westbrook, Encinitas. If you look at what's being proposed, you've got a commercial area that's very important to Encinitas as far as the amount of money that it generates. And what you're trying to do is make it more difficult for people to use the shopping areas. Second, I'm going to talk about the bicycle things you keep talking about and bringing up. What's being proposed for El Camino is the same ones that were proposed on 101, which I believe the bicyclists call it the death trap. And if that's what you're proposing, it's not a good idea. We have bike lanes, but now you want to put up bowlers, you want to do this, you want to do that. We've had at least 32 accidents on 101 and 1 death. And you want to put it on El Camino Real that has even more traffic, that a lot of it is transit and a lot of it isn't. But the thing of it is, you have to make it easy for people to get where they're going. And it's not going to happen with these drawings that's being brought up to you. First of all, you're doing a streetscape. You are not doing a specific plan. And the funding or the grant that you got from HCD was for low-income housing. This is not affordable housing that you're talking about because you're putting other numbers in there. If we're trying to meet RENA numbers, then start calling it low-income housing. It's a lie to the state, it's a lie to yourself, and it's a lie to your residents. You want to put in RENA numbers, then tell people you're putting in low-income numbers. Second, what we see right now is that you don't really have a plan. You've got a landscape plan. And we don't need more bicycles with bowlers so that it mimics 101. It's really disturbing that the city, the council, has not done anything about 101 and the way that is developed. I don't think anything that you write into a resolution that says that you as a council are exempt from any problems that happen is going to exempt you. So look about it, try to be caring for the residents. No, do not continue with this landscaping plan. It is not a specific plan. Stop it tonight. Say that's it. We'll think about something else. We're still doing well. And say no to the plan and what's ever proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hensy.
Unless there are any other public comments, I have a few questions. Okay. So one question I have is my understanding of our coastal zone is that it reaches to El Camino Real. Is it true that the east side of ECR is not within the coastal zone, but the west side is? And if so, how do we expect, is that going to reflect design differences, or do we expect to see a disparity between the two sides of the street?
That is correct, and no, we don't expect to see design differences between the street. The design standards that we've written into the plan apply to both sides equally.
Okay. And I guess it'll remain to be seen how the Coastal Commission is interpreted with future housing development, but that's good to know. A small thing here on the frontage zone. So I think all the council members have been on Mark Wisniewski's tour. You don't probably know him, but he's a really respected arborist in our city. And he often points out some of the failures with our code in how we constrain trees within parking lots, you know? So we're trying to get shade trees. We're trying to let trees grow and establish root systems. And along these frontage zones, I have the concern that we might end up replicating that constraint of the trees. So I think I see that we have 6 feet of the frontage zone, and I think it's really important that surrounding the trees is pervious surface so that we can make sure that the trees aren't like in a little cage with a bunch of asphalt around them. So that's something that I hope we can make explicit. And then I have a question. It's probably a question for Melinda, and it's mainly just I need my memory jogged a little bit because I've forgotten this. So I think when we had our in-depth discussion about the state laws that were going to be allowing the density by right was the time that we removed the overlay, the mixed-use overlay from this site, because we assumed that it's all done by right. But say that we wanted to include some of these, we want to include the specific plan for our 7th cycle housing element, and we have a map. If we wanted to have development outside of what these state laws allow, would we have to go through the full EIR process and again bring it to a vote of the people to allow development that is different from what the state law provides?
If we were going to change the zoning in the specific plan area, then we would need to, for instance, to allow housing to meet arena for 7th cycle, we would need to go through a vote process.
And do like the EIR for this effort retroactively, basically.
Correct. We would have to do a separate environmental document to address that.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Well, I understand. Okay, thank you. That concludes the questions on that. And it's just some thoughts that I have about how we're talking about the bike lanes. I see that there are some constraints and we have to have these bike lanes buffered and they're not separated and protected, physically separated. But I think that in our planning, we should be keeping the goals really high level, that we do want class 1 bike lanes where possible, that we do want protection for cyclists, that we do want physical separation and not just buffers, because I think it's kind of beyond the scope of what we can currently imagine right now, how different this corridor is going to look once we see the exodus of big box retail that we're seeing across the country. And there start to be these opportunities for immense change that is, hard to imagine right now. So I just encourage us to keep that language within the planning documents and let that be the goal for us, even if at this time we do understand there are constraints. And that concludes my comments now.
Okay, thank you. And you have a slide in there that says changes in project direction, and I think that it's good to take a look at that again and reiterate some of the changes that were made because of state law. So AB 2011 and SB 6, cities must approve by right high-density affordable housing projects of 5 units or more. Kelly just mentioned that. So we removed, initially this specific plan was likely to have an overlay zone for the specific plan, and AB 2011 SB 6 replaced that. So it made it simpler to complete this and to do the environmental, and so that's where we are right now. But the question about future development under AB 2011 and SB 6 is likely to raise issues that are of importance to the city and may bring impacts that are much less than desirable. So I'm not sure what, with, I think it's Bankers Hill versus City of San Diego, there were clearly density bonus trumped just about any other document and allowed for people to go quite high. So that is certainly of concern, but since it's density bonus law, we have learned the hard way that trying to buck density bonus is somewhat futile. We have spent millions of dollars on that. So looking at the other issues on this slide, that we changed the boundaries because of the Encinitas Ranch specific plan and the mobile homes. We didn't have the overlay for mixed use. We took a look at the streetscape, and then the emphasis on objective design standards was specifically to try and address projects that might come from AB 2011 and SB 6. So I think these were important changes. Donna mentioned that our specific plan is different than when we started. I assume HCD is aware of these changes, or it still fits within the grant requirements. So I support these changes in direction. So Commissioner Sherratt.
Yes, I'd like to show the presentation from the workshops I attended. As a representative of Planning Commission, I submitted it to Melinda and IT. Do you have that ready to roll out? I submitted it to you, Melinda. If you don't, I can speak through it, but it would be better to see it.
It was the PDF that got emailed to IT service desk.
Give me 1 second, you're probably getting pulled up if it's
Okay.
in service desk.
I can start as a walkthrough of the workshops that we attended, just so that we can get rolling while he looks for my presentation, which I emailed for today, specifically for today. So we had 3 workshops, as you remember. The most recent one included the mitigated negative declaration. And so one of the biggest problems in Encinitas is that we were incorporated in 1986, and we were using a lot of standards of development from San Diego County days, and many of those were allowed to continue. They may be substandard for Encinitas' current requirements, but they've been allowed to persist. So some of the things that you need to think about when we create partnerships between transit developers, nonprofit orgs, and the city to seek funding to build 100% affordable housing, it can be truly affordable instead of more of the same expensive market rate housing. If you can use land trusts, for example, you can build 100% affordable housing. And need to consider the facts that we can do better moving forward, and that this specific plan is an opportunity to do better. Other cities have done so. For example, Fallbrook requires street trees with new development or even extensive redevelopment. We can do the same. We can do better. We can require impervious paving, for example. We can require, and we do require on much of our new development, bioswales and similar things that help and are best practices for stormwater management. But as we look at our city's development, we started out with Native Americans here, preceding all of us. Then, from there, we had the 21 Missions route, where El Camino Real is the royal highway, right? And so we have a couple of those mission markers left standing on that route. Those are on the city to maintain because they are not on a state highway. Yeah, if you can scroll down a bit. Can I scroll where I am? Do I have control or no? Yes. So Encinitas incorporated nearly 40 years ago. That's in the past. We didn't have solar. We didn't have LED. We didn't use cell phones. Times have changed. We need to change. So think about it. As we went through the 21 Missions route, then we went into steam train water stop. We went into the El Camino Real Transit as a route for commuters. We have flower growers coming through town, the development of Self-Realization Fellowship, the evolution of surfing with Linda Benson, Rob Mikado, up to present day. Times changed over this long flow of time, but even in the last 40 years, we have had a significant amount of change. We could require that added housing to be 50 to 60% for sale. Why? That is the existing character of Encinitas. We have about 60% home ownership, a little bit more actually, maybe something like 63%. Why aren't we requiring that in our new development? If we have 63% or 60, even 50% for sale development, as a requirement, we still are allowing rentals in the other percentage that's remaining to add up to 100. And the thing about that makes a big difference, the higher ownership is what has built the stability and character of our city to be what it is today. So the way you can do that is with land trust development. That is one of the things you should encourage in community benefits. Renters don't feel invested because they accurately feel priced out. They accurately feel left out. It leads to a lack of inclusiveness and subsequent transiency. Try to be inclusive. Try building in stability to keep a connected, strong community like we have right now. Try to avoid building transient, unaffordable, unconnected housing. Additional ideas that you might think about is making it, instead of chaotic here, there, things, a more cohesive theme in the design. As an architect, when we look at a project, small, big, whatever it is, we think about the theme of that project. What's our theme as a town? What do we want to show people who come here and live here? And so another idea might be, you know how Hollywood Boulevard has the Walk of Fame, stars? Maybe we should have a Walks on Water series of surfboards inset in the pavement. Maybe people would be willing to pay for their surfboard inset. Maybe their footprints on their surfboard. Maybe a famous surfer like Rob Mikado might do something like that for us. Maybe in select areas or plazas that we develop as a city. Who knows? So I'm going to scroll down. Regarding the mitigated negative declaration, I do have a couple of comments on that for consideration by the group assembled today. We could require additional landscaping, including street trees, up to 100% permeable paving. This wetland area treatment downstream at Cottonwood Park and the facility above Moonlight Beach, upgrading it is more expensive than point source treatment. When you're adding development, you're adding hard cover, you're increasing the runoff and pollutants that are going to go eventually out to the ocean through storm drains. So we want to think about that. Even though, yes, in 1986, we didn't have these development standards, and so we have all this hardscape and no permeable paving, and we don't even have bioswales really or things like that in this developed corridor now. So from workshop 2, I want to point out in the prior workshop, we saw the results from Rick. I want to point out that the entire task force was quite dismayed that the whole theme of that workshop was about building all this housing on the streetscape. But actually it was the purpose of hiring Rick, right, is to present what is possible and not possible, what constraints, what. But anyway, questions came up. Lots of questions came up in the task force. And the things that people wanted to see and the things that they were seeing already in the existing housing and existing commercial development were a lack of walkability, whereas we would desire walkability, a lack of safety because it was such a high traffic area and they wanted desirable to have safety. We were asked whether 1.5 acres is a large enough site to zone for mixed use. And I think it's a good starting point, and other people had varying opinions, but it allows a more gradual change with smaller projects than if we only go with huge areas. And another question that came up was whether to rezone the entire corridor. That's moot because we are not zoning at all. Awnings at commercial buildings could help with walkability because they provide shelter from sun or rain. Task force indicated, let's see, proximity to grocers such as Ralph's, Vons, Stater Brothers, and major roads is desirable. Let's see, perhaps senior community, perhaps 55 plus. And let's see, the knowledge that senior age population is increasing significantly was also something that means that the amenities for seniors provided would be important to them for buy-in. A good thing to do for Rick would have been a tally of green space before and after development scenarios, examples of amenities. And let's see if I can scroll down here. I'm not sure. Does this let me move forward through here? How do we? I see. So for example, I think these are the kind of things that I would like to see Rick show us. Example of a bench that protects a tree, which the tree provides shade, and then the bench provides the seating. For ideas for the development, curvilinear benches, and not plastic, made from natural materials. You see a curved bench, again, native plants. So simple bench, but again, natural materials, wood, stone, brick. More creative ideas. What we want to show these developers are examples of things that feel like our community. They're creative, innovative. Here's something on rooftops. When you think about the rooftop, we could have a green roof requirement that helps diffuse some of the libido from sun, creating extra heat. We don't want these roofs to become heat sinks, in other words. Cool roof, green roof, unless, of course, some of it might be taken up with solar. Things like this could be given as examples of the kind of art that we might want to see in our town that captures some of what we have. I think the image above adds spots of color, but the image below, it's natural colors. And if we're thinking about making this corridor show our history of Native American missions and so on, maybe the one below gives a more consistent, but maybe pops of color, maybe some pops of color. How about for the city, adding something like a piano with a message that gives our community more of our community vibe? Here's a utilitarian bike lockup. You want people riding bikes, right? So you have to provide for the parking to be secure for bikes, because when I ride my bike around town, it's really not much parking anywhere. Everywhere I go, I have trouble finding bike parking. We need these, but here's something that's utilitarian, but here's an innovative, simple, inexpensive paint treatment that makes it a little more fun, right? A little more, giving it a little bit more of a vibe of it belongs there rather than it's just stuck in the ground. And down below, this is a storm drain, but it's been turned into something, or a vent or something, but it's been turned into something that might be, for example, a splash pad, a little splash pad park for a kid or something. These kinds of utilitarian barriers, but a little paint treatment. Paint is inexpensive. It's a good way to go. Below that paint, painted a little slithering snake with its tongue out. A more expensive treatment might occur, say, at the central location at a plaza, something that has maybe a little bit of LED on it or something, a more pricey thing to do, but maybe one place central to it, or maybe at both ends. And so these kinds of things, what I would like to see from Rick is more innovation, more creativity. There's some Bud Lights going across, maybe an elevated way across at Mountain Vista or another high pedestrian zone, such as the corner of Encinitas and El Camino Real. So some takeaways I have left with everyone here from my presentation, so that you can kind of have something to think about, both for this meeting and for future for city, as far as what are we doing here? What, are we going to, the population of residents aged 75 to 84 is projected to increase by nearly 32% between 2021 and 2026. What are we doing for that group? What, is this addressing that? People that want to downsize don't need great big places to live. They maybe need a tiny home, right? They need amenities that they can easily get to. So these are kind of just some ideas for y'all to think about. Strategies.
Susan, we have a couple other speakers here, so I
Okay.
appreciate your input.
Yeah.
Is there any reason why the images
Yeah,
that she
the only other
used
comment I
cannot be
wanted to make is that on the
cannot be
task force,
incorporated
we
into the
all
document?
agreed there are too many driveways, and we need to try to eliminate that
Yes,
hazard.
that is something that we've been trying to do. So can you speak to the elements that she has in here, that in her presentation? Is there a reason some of those can't be on that same page that has the
Are you speaking to?
sample types and quality of community benefits?
Yes, so we certainly could include some additional examples. What we did in the standards was set forth and encourage and require different kinds of amenities. We didn't necessarily stipulate the theme or precise design. We were leaving that detail to be further directed by council. But certainly, yes, we could increase the number of illustrative examples provided in the plan.
Well, she talks about the history of the El Camino Real, and I think it would be appropriate. We do have some of the original bells, but, oddly enough, they're in the middle of they're in the median. So the little plaque that says, hey, this is a historic bell, people can't read unless they cross the street to the median. So maybe there's more that we can be doing on that historic theme in the document.
To
So,
recognize the historic nature along the corridor,
okay.
absolutely.
Councilmember Ehlers.
Yeah, I thought the tiny home and tiny, I like to, in this case, it's probably more like tiny condo, right? Because it's really, these are going to be more high rises. So we grappled with a similar situation back, and I don't know if Steve, if you were on the Planning Commission when we did the R30, I think you were. When we talked, when we adopted R30 as a zone, maybe it was before your time. So one of the things that did make it into the R30 zone was the concept of the maximum average unit size. And that was done very purposefully because it is actually independent of achieving your number of units you're granted under density bonus. So it is in fact a good way to control volumetric size of apartments or whatever, and also help to try and guarantee tiny homes or tiny condos that is a way of getting to affordability. Right? So one of the things I would like to see in this specific plan is, just like our R30 zone, put in something that says the maximum average unit size for any residential incorporated into this zone would be so many hundred square feet. I think when it went through Planning Commission, the number was, we started out at 800. I think we compromised at 900. But when it went to council, it got bumped up to 1,000 for rental and 1,100 for ownership. And I've been watching, because we built a bunch of R30, or we've designed a bunch of R30, and if you take a Goodson property jumps to mind, my recollection is that the average, maximum average unit size, so in other words, if you take the average of all the units in there, is somewhere in the mid-800s. So so really the fact of the matter is that we put this 1,000, 1,100 limit on, and it had zero effect. Market rate is well below that. If we want to get units that are more naturally affordable, then we really ought to have a number down at the 800 and possibly, even a little smaller. But we ought to look at that. I'd like to see numbers and say, hey, and by the way, the reason it's an average size, so you can have a 3-bedroom that's 1,400 square feet. You can have 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, and then you can have a single room apartment and have the full mix, which we already like to see on all these units. So along with that, the average unit size, I think I had one other, and the other advantage is that this would, I always think of developments as balloons, right? They're trying to fit so much volume in there. So that would actually shrink the overall balloon. I would also like to see, and this is not in R30, if we could have a ratio of livable space versus, or I should say, unit space versus accessory space, and that we could put some limit on that average size. Again, this is not waivable because you couldn't, it's got nothing to do with achieving your density. It would be saying if you have, 100,000 square feet of unit space, then you're allowed 20% or 30%. I don't know what the industry average would be, but that way, I think we've really then put a limit on the balloon size, which is going to reduce the need to get waivers, to reduce the need to go up multiple extra stories. And I think that's one of the concerns I have, and this, including it in the specific plan, would help us with AB 2011 and SB 6. Quite frankly, I think we could use it in our code citywide because there are quite a few parcels outside of this specific plan that will have the exact same problem. I'll yield at this point.
Okay, Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you. I just will make a statement, and then I have some questions. My statement is I support entirely Commissioner Sherrod's comments, and thank you for those. And if the rest of the commissioners also have some comments, I look forward to hearing them. And also Councilmember Ehlers and our other council members' comments. Very good and well placed. So one of the things that I'm curious about, I'm seeing a gap here that concerns me. I guess two gaps. One is there's really not a lot of attention in the specific plan to the context and being context sensitive. And I think this goes to some of Commissioner Sherrod's comments. Now you look at El Camino Real and you go, where's the context? Where's the there? Because for so long it's almost felt like an injured part of our city. But what we have the opportunity to do here is fix that, to create and to pull from what not only our historic context is, but what our culture, what our art is, but also from the natural setting. So we have our native plants, we have the cliffs, the sandstone cliffs nearby, we have our wetland, we have so many fragments of things that are so important to our natural setting and our cultural setting that exist in hidden places. And honestly, they feel like hidden places, but like who knew there was a wetland there? It's like people don't even know that, but you look and you find it and there it is. And it's so important to us. So what we want to do is actually use this specific plan to pull those things forward and make them more transparent and make them more part of what the developers are required to do when they have the opportunity to come into our city and develop in our beautiful city. So we almost have to go a little bit further than you might think to be specific about what that means, because a developer might not even see that. If we use soft language like context sensitive and things like that, they might not, well, what is that, asphalt? That's what El Camino Real is. No, that's not what we're getting at. What we would be getting at is pulling in that existing value of the existing visual and environmental and cultural setting. So I'm sure I'll be following up with some more specific comments on that, but I wanted to tee that up as a connecting concept. So one of the things that then lends to is when I'm looking at the objective standards in the document and I'm considering how those act versus the public benefits, objective standards are the stronger tool. So I really want everything that's important in the objective standards. And so I want to kind of play off of something that seems to be evident, and if I'm incorrect, let me know, but something like permeability, where we talk about permeability in the document and permeable surfaces, and we talk about its benefit to stormwater management. But I don't see that it's required in objective standards for all hardscape. Is there a reason why we couldn't require that? And I say that because we're building, with all the development we're doing, and all of this that's mandated by the state, we are just developing hard surfaces everywhere across our community. And what we're leaving these very tiny areas to plant trees, and these tiny areas are needing to do a lot of things, and to also make those areas as permeable as possible. Then what we do is we reduce the impacts on our storm drain system. And Susan touched on that as well. So something like 100% permeable surfaces, I don't see any reason why that couldn't be an objective standard. So, kind of look to staff, maybe we don't drill down at that level of detail at this meeting, but perhaps there's some things like that we could capture in our objective standards and not just leave them in the public benefits to be chosen, maybe if we can give something back to the developer. The same goes for trees in the street frontages, requirement for trees in the street frontages. And if that's already in here, I apologize, but I did not see it. Is there any reason why we can't call to our climate action plan to pull in some objective standards, for instance, associated with shade in our urban context to reduce the heat island effect, or carbon sequestration of the trees in our urban environment? If we can pull those into our objective standards, then we'll be more sure to get what we want. So another thing that I want to mention while I've got the floor here is under public benefit, I see that in order to bring in the kind of theming that we want, and maybe this can be objective standards too, if we could also require a % for local art. So that's just another tool, and I don't know if that is something that we can put in our objective standards. But if we really want our projects to have a feel and to interpret our local art and our culture, can we require a percentage of the project for local art? And so the only other thing I wanted to make a comment on, and this is perhaps more of a question, I see a gap where we're talking in the document about paseos, and we're talking maybe only very little in the document about the livable outdoor spaces. But I don't see that we have any tool in here that requires those things. So maybe if staff or our consultant could comment on that. The outdoor space is such an important space for a community. It creates community. But we're not requiring, I mean, we're kind of saying, well, if the developer wants to do a paseo, then this is how they should do it. But under what circumstance would one developer do a paseo? I just don't see how that's actually a realistic thing for us to even have in here. If there's no real tool for us to say, well, you should have a paseo and it should have connectivity, and yeah, you need an outdoor plaza associated with that. Where's the hammer there? And so maybe that's more of a question for, and if it's just something that needs to be followed up on, that's fine too. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I'm just looking for page numbers. So we do on page 53, we do have surface parking design feature requirements, and we do include the requirement for permeable pavers. So that's objective 5C on page 53. Sorry.
That's of the specific plan document itself. In the agenda report, it's page 63 and 64.
That's what we have, the agenda report's what we have up. And so that's a good point, so thank you for calling that out. I think maybe my follow-up comment would be, let's make sure it's addressed in all of the hardscapes that are being required throughout, so it's good, it's parking, but sidewalks and other hardscape. Yep, thank you.
And then just to address your comment on the paseos and common open space, so on page 54 of the specific plan itself, there is common open space requirements to include a range of open space opportunities, including paseos, and then there also is a requirement for access to plazas, paseos, and courtyards included. That's objective number 2.
If I could just do one follow-up then, since you're up at the mic. What is requiring a single developer to actually include that in what they submit to the city for approval and for construction?
The standard is requiring them to provide either plazas, paseos, or courtyard, for example, either plazas, paseos, or courtyards. Under the placemaking standards, there's also a requirement for them to choose 3 out of a menu. So there's not a specific standard requiring a paseo precisely, but there is a range of public open space requirements that they have to provide some amount of that.
Is that in the objective standards? I'm trying to
Yes,
figure out where
that
that
is on
it
page
is.
54 of the document.
Okay.
There's common.
Do you provide examples, graphic examples?
There are not significant graphic examples of what a paseo would look like.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
The community benefits chapter I find quite interesting, and I'm particularly looking at the list of community benefit options. And in going down that list, I see, for example, extension of Encinitas Creek Trail or Encinitas Creek Trail enhancement. And the Encinitas Creek Trail is down towards the newer Encinitas Ranch development where the creek is daylighted. But is there a way that I would like to see us incentivize the daylighting of the creek south of that, so that if there was development proposed on a parcel on the the west side of El Camino Real, where the creek is currently in a pipe, what would it take to get a design that incorporated the daylighting of the creek so that we could perhaps reduce the impervious surface that our creek is running through and take advantage of the very important biofiltration opportunities there. I just had a meeting, 2 meetings in fact, on Sunday at Cottonwood Creek Park and got to sit next to Cottonwood Creek as it meandered by, having been daylighted by the city when they constructed Cottonwood Creek Park. And I think everybody knows that Cottonwood Creek was put in a pipe as well and starts in a pipe around the vicinity of Encinitas Boulevard and Quail Gardens Drive / Westlake, and then rages through that pipe to the ocean. And so I think that one of the most important things that happened as part of the Encinitas Ranch specific plan was that wetland was protected and that creek has been daylighted. So anything that we could do to incentivize additional daylighting as part of a project, I think is worth pursuing. I won't give you any specific language, but maybe you could work on that. I also note that there is public art that's part of the community benefit table here. And I'm wondering if, I think the idea is to incentivize these community benefits, not make them a requirement. Is that correct? So they get these points, and then they can use these points for have reduced standards of some sort. Can you go through that process?
There is both. So in the community benefits chapter, yes, that is set up to incentivize, not require, but incentivize developers to implement something such as public art. In the objective design standards, there are also places where that as an amenity is included in a menu of features that a developer is required. So let me just look for the page number. Under 61. Page 51 of the specific plan. We have a section on placemaking, and it touches on the different elements that can help contribute to the making of a place. And the objective design standard requires a developer to implement three elements out of the menu. Public art is one of the elements on that menu.
Okay, and so on the subject of community benefit points and their use. That's a fairly new concept, as I understand it, right?
The Community Benefits Program?
Yeah, and
Yes, that
points,
is a
yep.
new introduction.
Yeah, and we don't do that anywhere else, and not a whole lot of cities do. Is that correct?
Other cities have done it. It certainly would be new for Encinitas.
Okay. And I would be interested to know how successful, how many developers actually, take advantage of that program. And I'm particularly looking at the fact that there's the maximum number of development points a project can be granted via community benefits is 90 community benefit points. And I wonder about putting a max that, when I look at this list of some of the options, I think that it includes a lot of things that would be nice to incentivize. And so maybe we either identify community benefits that don't count towards the maximum or something like that. And I don't know how others have done it. I'm not I don't want to create a mess of the program, but there are some things like daylighting the creek that I would really like to see incentivized.
I'll just note, we're not capping the number of additional amenities that they can provide. What we're doing is trying to cap the number of points they can accumulate and essentially apply for an incentive in return for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and yes, and so, drilling down into all that, maybe having a max is not in the city's best interest. Maybe the benefits that you gain from a developer proposing these community benefits is greater, depending on what maybe depending on what the incentive is or the concession or
Benefit, yep.
waiver, right?
Yep.
So I suppose the devil is in the details, but I also want to say I support Councilmember Ayler's efforts to limit the size of a development, these units, and I would like to see a way to impose a percentage requirement, and maybe it's through the community benefits program. You get X number of points for every 10% of for sale units you put on in the project. And for every unit that is smaller than 1,000 square feet or whatever. I think that one of the things about this specific plan area is that it's ideal for developing housing that could be workforce housing. And so, these are jobs in that corridor that may not be the highest paying jobs. The medical units, maybe there are some high paid nurses or, other office folks, but some of the retail, you don't get paid a whole lot. But in the end, that housing type that would end up being market rate affordable to the workforce in that corridor, I think is important. Thank you. Commissioner Sherrod?
Oh, you said what I was going to say about
okay.
including in community benefits ownership, and some other things you said were things
Yes.
I was going to say. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for your comments. Yes.
Real quick, on the map, can you pull the map back up for the specific plan area? And this is probably a question that's 2 to 3 years too late, but I wasn't around. The question really is from Armstrong's Nursery north to Home Depot. The area that's vacant right now, that's a separate specific plan. Was there any reason why? I understand that the specific plan for the Target Center is part of the Ecke Ranch specific plan. Is there a reason why in the future an adaptive reuse for, say, the Home Depot into a very large square could not have been concluded as part of the specific plan area for mixed-use zoning going forward, although we've dropped the mixed-use zoning, so maybe that's just the wrong phrase.
So that is the Home Depot specific plan area, and that specific plan does not, it's not eligible for AB 2011 and SB 6 development. So that is why it's not incorporated in here, as well as that specific plan had a lot of environmental constraints around the development of that project. And so where you have Home Depot and that development is kind of where everything can stay.
But we clearly put a Home Depot there and had a specific plan that approved the Home Depot next to a wetland. So why couldn't you build workforce housing there? You approved a specific plan that included a Home Depot next to a wetland. What's the difference? It's already there. And why does AB 2011 have to apply to the El Camino specific plan? Can't we're creating a specific plan to look into the future, and maybe AB 2011 gets redacted somewhere or taken over. We're trying to build a specific plan for the city of Encinitas going forward, and that's a big swath of undeveloped property.
So there's none of the vacant land that surrounds the Home Depot is developable. It's all set aside as environmentally constrained. So the only part we'd be talking about is the area of the Home Depot itself, including that, and then we'd have to essentially you'd have to undo what the Home Depot specific plan is to get into redeveloping that area. Sorry.
Undo or add to? I mean, do you have to subtract before you add? Can't you just add new conditions on top of what's already there that would allow the overlays that we're talking about here?
I don't believe it'd be that simple, no.
Well, nothing's simple. That's why we're taking 3.5 years to do this. So why was it not included because it was too hard?
It wasn't included because it already had its own specific plan area.
But if I'm understanding, the Yankee specific plan was included, but the boundary was moved.
I'm sorry, but I mean, I can't speak to that. I didn't make those decisions whether or not to include it or not, but I think there are valid and logical reasons why it should not be included, including the existing development, the area surrounding it, the difficulty of redeveloping that site, and the existing use, which is robust and really a highest and best land use for a commercial property.
Today. But I mean, what we're trying to do is plan for the future. And if it's already, again, the gap is, if it's already developed now, we're talking about increasing the density of doing something else in the future. So I'm still kind of at a loss on why we couldn't include it or why we couldn't create plans for the future development. I understand it's difficult. I understand there's environmental components to it, but we certainly approved the Home Depot at one point in the past. Seems to me that if we're talking about turning the Ralph Shopping Center into an apartment complex, we can certainly turn the Home Depot into the same thing.
Member Ehlers, Councilmember Ehlers.
Yep, thank you. So the first question, I want to second the tree root zone concept, because I look driving up and down El Camino Real in the area right in front of Home Depot. We're developing that canopy that we used to have on Leucadia, and it's great. And it's because we have those huge central root zones, and the trees on the edge have very large areas. So I don't know what the number is for the number of square feet, but I would very much support that concept, and we put some requirement, objective requirement. The second thing I wanted to ask is, do we get RENA credit for AB 2011 and SB 6 in any way, shape, or form? Or is this outside of that? Or is, maybe the better question to ask, is there a way for us for this specific plan to take into account AB 2011 and SB 6 in order to get RENA credit? And I don't know if I'm asking Patty or Carrie or Melinda this question.
Or Tarquin.
Or Tarquin, yeah.
So, Commissioner Ehlers, any housing unit that's built in the city counts in our current cycle, in the cycle that we're currently in. And I think it's as we head into cycle 7, I think it's an unanswered question at this point as to how the existence of these laws will be taken into account for how we are able to add new units and new eligible sites for housing as we move into that cycle. That's just an unanswered question right now. Cycle 7 is being developed at this point.
But from a capacity standpoint, for the no net loss calculation, are we able to forestall a no net loss issue and not have to rezone additional because of AB 2011 SB6? That's,
Sure.
I think,
I
you're
think-
saying, yeah.
Yeah, if a project were to come forward, say, in cycle 6 and get entitled and provide affordable units, those would count toward our RENA and would serve to offset triggering the no net loss.
But only as they are built and occupied. I'm asking the additional question, can we get what's the capacity credit in order to count against no net loss? Have we even asked HCD how they are accounting for the additional capacity for lower income? Because obviously everywhere you can put an AB 2011 SB6, we have an inclusionary requirement that will, if they do take advantage of it, will give us additional low income units, and we ought to be able to get some sort of capacity credit for that.
Yeah, I think at this point, now that we're in the cycle, capacity credit is for setting up the how you meet the RENA 3-year housing element.
Unless you hit no net loss.
So now we're in the, well, we would need to be, work through with that if we trigger no net loss, identify sites and have that conversation with them about how they would look at any sites that are on AB 2011, but they would be looking for sites that have, they always prefer vacant sites. So we'd be looking for some reasonable feasibility that those sites would actually develop with the housing units and not just the fact that the state law provides for units on those sites.
So that answers we don't get any capacity credit, and we can't use that to offset no net loss, although we're not sure, we haven't quite been in the situation yet.
Yeah, we don't know for sure, but at this point, it's just like any, its effect on RENA and no net loss is really tied to a development occurring on the site. You know, just like any other noun housing element site that we get that produces units, helps provide, you know, units in the categories that it provides, and that helps to satisfy RENA.
Yeah.
And that's really the point of no net loss, is getting the affordable units up to a certain number.
Okay.
I think that's a question that we're going to need to have a council agenda item for if we get into the situation where no net loss is invoked. I think that from where I sit, I think we should not have to upzone again, given the fact that we just, these SB 11 or SB 6 and AB 2011 did what it did. I think one of the difficulties we might have is that, as you well know, when we upzoned for cycle 6, or maybe it was the end of 5, we had to have developer interest. We had to have a letter stating that they were interested in developing. And so the question is whether we can get any developers to provide us a letter like that using the 2 new laws. I think the other question that this council will need to consider is whether we owe it to the voters under Proposition A to take that question to them directly, regardless of what state law is, if in fact we are using it to meet the obligations we may have under RENA in the future. So, Commissioner Sherrod, you had your hand up. We have very few minutes. We have a minute for you. 1 minute.
Well, one thing I wanted to add is that it doesn't have to be in the community benefits that your art should be from local expert artists, or that your landscaping should be from local expert landscapers, people who have a certification, a landscape architect credential, something like that. That doesn't have to be in the benefits, but it could be in the language of the specific plan, and that would help give it the community vibe. You know, if you're going to give us a piano, that then the local person should do the art on the piano or whatever. So all of that local input, if we're going to have surf art, it should be by local surfers, local artists.
Thank you.
I think that would be easy to help ensure community vibe.
Yes. Councilmember Hensy.
I just wanted to make an additional comment on the topic of no net loss and using these state streamlining laws to satisfy our no net loss fear. And one is that it's really important, I think, for HCD, if they would accept one of these developments as a site for this current housing element cycle, that the developer intend to do so within the current cycle, which ends in 2029. And so that, to me, seems like a constraint that when we're thinking about this, we shouldn't be hopeful that exact scenario will play out, just because there's so much criteria to taking advantage of one of these streamlining opportunities, including the fair labor agreements. So it was something that Carrie and I discussed at length, because I think we all hope that this could be a place where we would be able to accommodate that siting, but it's 2024. And so the hopefulness that we could get something to redevelop within just a couple of years makes it a slim chance.
Well, but 2024, that gives us 5 years till the end of the cycle. So, but there's no question we're going to, once it's no net loss is triggered, we're going to need to have some difficult conversations about how to proceed to address that. And certainly the obligations under Prop A can create some challenges. So how to work through that is going to be a pretty important conversation to have. Commissioner Pendergrass.
Real quick, under the community benefit component, if we have a list and let's say 10 years from now, something else that's benefiting the community is not on that list, does the developer under the specific plan have a chance to come back and say, I want to do something different? Say there's 10 on the list and 10 years from now, 10 more things have popped up that are important to the community, important to the council at the time, can the developer opt for something different, or can the council or city add things to the community benefit plan?
So right now, no, I don't think there's an option for sort of an other, I think what you're referring to, but that certainly could be incorporated, and then we just stipulate at the discretion of which approving body.
Okay, thank you. So we have now received a report and given you a lot of feedback. I saw a lot of note-taking over there. You're going to revise the draft to incorporate as many of those items as you can and provide us feedback if you can't incorporate them. Is that correct? And I saw on the little mappy thing that eventually it's going to be at the Planning Commission for the Planning Commission to consider and make a decision and a determination and have a vote. And then it comes to the council? Okay. Thank you all. I appreciate you being here, and this meeting is adjourned.
Well, you did the work. Oh, really? I did the whole thing. You know. I'm a very smart guy. Yeah. It looks beautiful, by the way. So I think there'll be pictures on the screen. Oh, okay. Bottom of my piece of paper here. Okay, thanks. Yeah, got it. Thank you. Great first name. I definitely knew that. I know. Yeah. I'll remember yours. Yeah.
No, that's this. That is item 10. But right now it's the water. Get through that, and then that'll be later. After 6 p.m.
Bruce just ran to get something from his car.
All right, we're gonna start though.
Well, give me one moment. Okay, ready when you are.
Good to have my mic on. Good afternoon. I'm going to call to order the special meeting of the San Diego Water District at 5 p.m. Wednesday, June 26, 2024. And Madam Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Board Member Lyons.
Here.
Board Member Ehlers is not in the room at the moment. Board Member Hinsey is not in the room at the moment. Board Member Ehlers is present. Vice President Kranz
Here.
and President Blackwell.
Here.
And Board Member Hinsey is also present. The record will reflect that all members of the board are present. And please note that San Diego Water District board members receive an independent stipend of $100 for convening water district meetings pursuant to San Diego Water District Resolution number 89-07.
Okay, thank you. And if you're able, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we are going to move into the agenda, and we actually have a special presentation. So I don't think we have a mic, so maybe I will read it from up here. Is there a presentation that goes with it? Okay. I don't see a mic there. Okay, then I'll come down there. And it's on. Okay, good. Well, it's my honor tonight to present the award for the 2024 Water Smart Landscape Contest. The SMART in the Water Smart means sustain and manage America's resources for tomorrow. It rewards water-efficient landscapes created by district customers, and it complements existing conservation rebates and incentives and educational outreach programs. We have 12 participating member water agencies that get involved, and our winners, who are here tonight, are Allison and Costa Haramis of Leucadia.
Is that microphone on? Is your mic on?
It is on.
There you go.
Okay, I have to hold it closer. Okay, so what the Haramis, and actually I heard it's really Allison Haramis who did the work. Costa gave it to her. But anyway, they removed the turf from the front yard last spring, replaced it with California natives and other drought-tolerant plants. The new landscape design has reduced their water consumption and lowered their time spent maintaining the yard, leaving more time to enjoy it. Some of the plants they used were Baja Fairy Duster, Germander, Grevillea Superb, very good, Lantana, and Lavender. And these plants are included on the County Water Authority's Nifty 50 list. The district recognizes their water conservation efforts with a $250 gift card to Home Depot and a district swag bag. And photos of the project will also be featured on the Water District's website, appearing in our quarterly newsletter, which drops on July 1st, and be highlighted in the city newsletter. All right, are we presenting anything tonight? Okay, winners, come on down. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, we have no photographer tonight. That's okay. And Costa, you can enjoy the winnings as well. So thank you very much. Thanks for being here too, and nice job on your yard. Gonna do a photo?
Yeah, I'll take a photo.
All right, thanks, Dan. Oops, okay, we will keep moving along. Do we have any oral communications tonight?
No, we do not.
All right. And moving on to S6, a report from closed session. We did not hold one. We'll move to any changes in the agenda.
No changes to posted agenda?
Okay. And then we'll move to the consent calendar. And are there any items being removed from the consent agenda today?
Nothing from the public.
I'll move approval of all the items in the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All right, perfect. Let's take a vote on that.
Sorry. Give me one moment. Motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you. We'll move to action items, which we do not have any action items today. But we'll move on to informational item, and we do have something there. That's a really important information. So I will turn it over to you, Mary Consent. Okay, perfect. This is a report on the San Diego County Water Authority Upfront Payment Discount Program. Okay. And Finance Manager Kazunga will give the oral report.
Okay. Thank you, President Blackwell and members of the board. This information item is to update the board on an upfront fixed charge payment program being floated by the San Diego County Water Authority as a way to relieve the challenging rate hikes that are being proposed. As you're aware, the latest communication from the Water Authority has determined that an 18.15% increase is needed for calendar year 2025. Additionally, over the next 2 years, the authority estimates that a total 39% increase in rates and charges will be necessary. The large increases are a result of declines in water sales volumes due to heavy rains experienced over the past 2 winters, rising contractual costs and inflationary price pressures, as well as withdrawals from the Rate Stabilization Fund of the Water Authority to provide rate relief to member agencies over the past few years. Staff is presenting this as an information item because the Water Authority Board will be voting on the rate increase at tomorrow's meeting. On May 30th, the Water Authority sent a memo to member agencies offering a discount on prepaying fixed charges in advance rather than monthly, as has been the norm. The opt-in pilot program would allow agencies to make a single payment by January 3rd of 2025 to cover fixed costs for a year rather than pay in 12 equal installments. Upfront payments would benefit the Water Authority and the region by enhancing their ability to float debt and provides flexibility for funding of its CIP in order to improve regional supply reliability. The Water Authority would also invest the upfront payments at about the same or higher rate than the discount. The upfront payment program would decrease the average effective rate from the proposed 18% to 16.7%. The three discount options that were outlined in the Water Authority memo include a July 2024 prepayment of the fiscal year fixed charge for a 4% discount, a January 2025 prepayment of the calendar year fixed charge also for a 4% discount, and a third option of a July 2024 prepayment of calendar year 25 fixed charges for a 6% discount. So what are the fixed charges? Every agency in the authority pays a portion of its costs as fixed costs on a monthly basis, regardless of how much water the agency purchases. Separately, each agency also pays its variable costs based on its water demand for the month. The fixed charges listed are those listed on this slide, which shows the district's current and the Water Authority's fiscal year 25 proposed and the now just adopted district fiscal year budgeted. This slide shows the upfront payments that would be required under each of the three options, and it also shows the potential savings to be derived and the opportunity costs in relation to the district's pooled current investments. And keep in mind that the district investments are pooled with the city's investments as well. Based on the recently concluded water rate study, staff had factored in increases of about 8.5% in the rates and charges from the Water Authority. The increases are now expected to be over 18%. While the upfront payment would essentially be revenue neutral since the fixed cost would still have to be paid, there would be an upfront payment of approximately $2.8 million versus the monthly payments of about $200,000 that the district would typically make, depending on the options on offer. In terms of cash flow impact, the impact is anticipated to be minimal since the district has a cash balance of approximately $22 million in its operating and CIP funds. Early in the fiscal year, many CIPs require very little outflow of payments to vendors as they are still either in the beginning or in the design phase. It's also worth mentioning that raising rates to absorb the rate increase would require a lengthy Prop 218 process that could not be accomplished in time to opt in for the upfront payment program. In terms of the impact on the city or the district investment strategy, a $2.8 million upfront payment would not be significant enough to impact the safety, liquidity, and yield return objectives that are outlined in the city and the district's investment policy. The discounts offered in the options represent a higher average rate of return than what is currently being earned by the city district portfolio. Making the upfront payment would require a dip into the reserves early in the fiscal year, but would then be replenished as water sales occur during the year. That concludes my presentation, and staff is available to answer questions.
Board Member Lyons.
Thank you, President Blackwell. So I have a couple things I want to share from my perspective on the San Diego County Water Authority. And also I have, this is really important that this come forward to us so that I can understand where we stand as a water district in evaluating what the options are that are before us right now. This isn't an action item, but it's a good opportunity for us to share the information we know and what our thoughts are. We have our board meeting tomorrow, and it has been streamlined so that we can spend a good amount of time addressing this question. It was brought forward at our last board meeting last month that there might be the possibility of the member agencies advancing or prepaying this upfront payment for fixed charges, but it wasn't really articulated in much detail. It was brought forward as an option for discussion, and what we decided at the last meeting was we would schedule our rate discussion this month, but we weren't going to take any action on any kinds of things like this because there wasn't enough information. So in the meantime, I think all of the member agencies have taken these ideas back to talk about and to present and to do some numbers and to see if really there's any advantage to our water district to advancing this money in a prepayment. If there is, we're seeing so far anyway, there's not a downside to doing it. If there's a return to us, that's a positive number. So if there's some information I can kind of glean today about that, I want to do that. And also what I've learned is that some member agencies have done their numbers and it doesn't work for them. So it really depends on the agencies, and we'll have that conversation tomorrow. So I could probably guarantee for everyone there'll be new information tomorrow that is not in front of us today that we'll be considering as we try to decide as a water authority what the rate increase will be. Also, what is known and I can count on is that the rate increase is going to be larger than what we thought it would be. Just based on the numbers that have been presented, it looks like it's going to be 16 to 18%. And if I remember right, I don't have my note here in front of me, but I think we were counting, we predicted that it would be 9%. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
It's 8.5% in the rate study.
8.5.
8.5 is what was in the budget for the next fiscal year.
That's what I thought. Thank you for clarifying. So either way, we're going to have to go through the Prop 218 process again, and so that's a question for staff. Is that true?
If the board makes the decision to pass this on to customers in their bills, then we would be required to begin a whole new Prop 218 process.
Would that then be a decision we would make at a future agenda, or not a future meeting date? Whether we decide to pass this along to customers immediately before?
I believe it would be something that would have to be done at a future meeting. It could not be done at this meeting because it hasn't been noticed. The public is not aware of it. But I can also defer to our city attorney too.
So it's not a for sure thing that we would have to revise our Prop 18 process. I guess that's what I'm looking for is clarification. It would be our choice whether we want to pass that additional rate percentage on to our customers during this cycle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to add to that, this increase is actually starting January 1st. So the first 6 months of the year, based on our fiscal year, there's no impact to our rates. So that's something that we have to look in, and the 6 months will give us enough time to evaluate the amount of water that's been used, Lake Hodges issues, and all that kind of stuff, so that we will have a better idea if we need to increase the rates more during the second half of the year, and maybe have it start on July 1st of next year. But usually the 218 process it's a minimum of about 6 months between hiring a consultant, doing the rate study, and doing everything.
Okay. So for me then, and Tarquin, if you were going to add anything there, it looked like you might want to speak.
I was, Board Member Lyons, I was just going to emphasize that the City Council, sorry, the Board cannot take action on this tonight. This
Yeah.
is simply informational only item.
Okay. So I guess those are the two questions I had. One, how does this affect our Prop 218? And I understand the answer now. And the second is, this is just a proposal. I just wanted to tell everyone this is a proposal that's out there right now. It may change tomorrow at our board meeting, and we'll bring that updated information back after the Water Authority takes action. Those are my questions and comments.
Good, thank you. Board Member Ehlers.
Yeah, question for Mary. The 2.8 million prepayment, you said, I think it's a snapshot. We had 22 million in cash reserves. What about through the year? Does that cash decline, or does it stay roughly flat throughout the year?
Depending on expenditures that are happening within the district, including operating expenditures and the CIP expenditures, that balance does drop, and then it's replenished as customers pay their bills, and we
Okay.
receive revenue in that sense.
But in general, month to month, it doesn't have a downward trend that the big payment comes in at the end of the year, and then it's generally oscillating around 22. And then just to make sure, would the 2.8 million prepayment, would it impact any of our reserves, policy reserves that we have in place?
We would probably have to dip into the rate stabilization immediately to make the upfront prepayment amount. And then usually at the end of the fiscal year, in which case this fiscal year ends next week, or is it this week? Next week. Then when we do the year-end close, we reevaluate what the net position is and then reset the three reserves that the district has. So at that point, we would see what the year-end closed at to determine what's remaining so that we can then reset the reserves based on board policy.
So the operating reserve plus the rate stabilization reserve, how big is that compared to that 22 million that we have in cash?
Our operating reserve is usually a percentage of the following year's expenditures, expected expenditures, and the rate stabilization reserve is set at about 15% of our rates and charges revenue only.
But can you put for this fiscal year a dollar amount on that? I'm trying to understand why we're having to dip into the rate stabilization, because 22 million sounds like a huge number, but if the operation reserve and then the rate stabilization is 20 million, then I understand.
No, the operating reserve, like I said, is usually a percentage of the following year's expenditures, and I believe that is about, I think I want to say about 5 million.
Okay.
And yeah, about between 5 and 6 million, and then the CIP reserve is usually about at this current time stands at about a little over 3 million, almost 4 million.
And the rate stabilization fund, is that separate from the operating stabilization or operating fund?
Yes, the operating reserve and the rate stabilization and the CIP reserves are all separate, and those are required by board policy.
Yeah, and how much cash is currently in the rate stabilization, roughly?
The rate stabilization is set at about 3.8 million, I
Okay.
would say. Yeah.
But you would take the money out of that, even though we have plenty of other cash reserves well beyond that, based on the numbers you just gave.
Yes, we would take it out of the rate stabilization because it is designed for an
That's what it's there for.
instance such as that.
Okay, cool.
Exactly.
Okay, great. And we'd just be paying that this year as opposed to, because the prepayment would occur this year, and then we'd get the rates kicking up in January, right? So, okay, I think I understand now. Thank you.
I had a question, and it is really what would be the next step? So if tomorrow the County Water Authority approves an 18% rate increase, And they also say they like this upfront payment program. What would that mean for us if we wanted to explore it? How quickly would we have to do it? We're about to have, some summer recess coming up, so can you explain that, please, Mary?
Well, the initial memo from the Water Authority said that if the board approves this upfront payment program, the payments would be required by January of 2025. So that gives us sufficient time to come back in either August or September to bring an item to this board to get your direction on how to proceed and still
Okay.
give us enough time to either make the prepayment in January or continue with operations as usual.
Okay, perfect.
Just to follow on that, this is one option of the three. The 6%, which is, if it's due in July, will most probably will not be able to make it. So we'll most probably be going with recommending the 4%, because in July, we will not be able to pay the payment unless the CWA has some other options available for us, because I would guess most water agencies will not be able to pay in the month of July anyway, because they need their board approval.
Right.
So if that's the case, we come back in August and request authorization from the board and give the different options that are available.
So if they design a program that has some flexibility in that first payment, for example, we would, okay, perfect, all right. Okay, I think I understand that. Are there any other questions? Okay, I'll thank you very much for that informational item. It's certainly on our minds now, so, but I appreciate that. Okay, moving forward to agenda item 12 is the board member reports pursuant to AB 1234. And does go down the row. Board member Lyons?
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report.
And I have nothing to report. And so with that, we'll turn to the last agenda item, which is general information or staff status reports.
I just wanted to bring to your attention that during the August meeting, we asked the Joint Facilities Engineering Manager to come and give a presentation about the CIP projects that, and I think that was also requested by some of the board members here. So Marissa?
I think that was you, Vice President Kranz, that asked to hear about the joint CIP projects.
And that will be coming in August, assuming everything goes well and she meets the timeline. Other than that, have a good July, and we'll see you back in August.
Yeah,
I
we
have
wish.
a question for the general manager. There was a project out on Encinitas Boulevard, just east of El Camino Real. Are there any updates on that?
We are in the process of working with the contractor. We're having some issue with the competency of the contractor in that area, and the contractor is taking its sweet time for them to do the work that is included in the contract. I don't know how much of I can go into the details, but we're hoping. Thank you, Darwin. So we're not going to be able to go into the details at this point in time. We're hoping that this will be completed by maybe the first or second week of July.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember, or Board Member Ehlers.
And just to ask, is that the same contractor working along Rancho Santa Fe in front of the 7-Eleven?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yes. Yep.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and causing all sorts of traffic problems. Everybody just associates it with Goodson, so, but it's not.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, with that, I'll thanks to the staff members for today's meeting, and thanks to the board members, and we will adjourn. And happy July.